All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. It is 1 o'clock, so we will get started, and I will turn it over to Sarah Jean to get us going. Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Jen. I'll just begin with our land and peoples acknowledgement. Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we are on and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous peoples, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. Oh,
Great.
welcome.
Oh,
Oh, there's Crystal.
Hi, so sorry. I
Hi,
was having a
Crystal.
hard time. I was having a hard time with my Teams. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm sure you're already into the introductions. Have you
Yes.
explained about the mics?
No, I just did the land and peoples acknowledgement. So if you want to take over from there,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Great, yeah. Thanks so much. And welcome everybody today to our session number 2 of this 5-part Keeping Organized as You Search series. So this is a very highly attended series that really helps our students develop their research. And it is for all our graduate students, and we have other students here today from Memorial University and some other CARU institutions, so welcome everybody. So I just wanted to let everyone know that today we have quite a few people joining us. I'm going to have the mics and the cameras muted just to alleviate any background noise. If there comes a time where you would like to ask a question using your mic during the question and answer period, please just raise your hand and I will give you access to your mic and camera. Otherwise, you can use the chat box. Do we have chat? Yes, we do. Okay. Making sure we have that enabled. So yes, you can use the chat box feature at any time as well. So this meeting is being recorded, just so everyone is aware, and it will be available in the meeting chat afterwards. There will be the recording and transcription there for everyone. I think that that's about it for me. Thanks for doing the land acknowledgement, Sarah Jean. So I'm going to hand it back to Sarah Jean Watt and Jennifer Rempel, who will be doing this series for us today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I just have to sneeze, so apologies for that. I took a pause there. So again, thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Sarah Jean. Again, welcome everybody to the session on keeping organized as you search. And again, we have a handout with some links to the session that I believe Crystal has emailed out already. So you should have those links in your hand. Oh, thank you for the blessing there, Lisa. I just sneezed right before the session started. So I was like, ah. All right, so to get to some intros, my name is Jennifer Rempel. I'm the Information Literacy and Resource Access Librarian here at Athabasca University. And I'm here with Sarah Jean, who can introduce herself.
Hey everybody, yes, I'm Sarah Jean Watt, the Right Site Coordinator. Very happy to have you here today. I'll just give you a couple of points about using Teams. I'd like to let you know that you can turn on live captions if that helps for you. So to do that, you would click More. It has the 3 dots icon, and then scroll down and click on Language and Speech, and then turn on live captions. And you can also mute the chat notifications if you like. Also under More, choose Settings, and then mute notifications and/or don't show chat bubbles.
Great. Thank you, Sarah Jean, for that extra information. So here's what we'll go over in the session today. We will talk first about time management and assignment calculators. We will go into search journals in Word and Excel and setting your search histories and alerts online. We'll then talk about organizing your research, including folder organization and file naming conventions. We'll then go into note-taking along with research planning and mind mapping. And finally, we'll wrap up with where to go for help, because we are covering a lot of material today. And so Sarah Jean will start us off with time management.
Oh, you're muted, Sarah Jean. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll share some tools and strategies to help you plan your time during the research and writing process. So first I'm going to focus on some shorter projects like for coursework. and term papers. And then I'll also give you some information about time management for longer projects like thesis and dissertation. So an assignment calculator is a really helpful tool that gives you a plan or schedule of the research and writing process broken down into steps, and each step has its own due date. So all you have to do is enter your start date and your end date. So start date is any day you want to start working on your assignment. It doesn't have to be today. You can choose whatever day in the future you like. And similarly, the end date doesn't need to be the actual due date. Ideally, you may actually want to choose an earlier date to allow yourself extra time, especially if you want to submit your draft to the right site to get feedback. And in that case, leave about a week to receive feedback from a writing coach and complete your revisions and edits. And I'll talk more about the right site at the end of the webinar. So now I'll talk about some assignment calculators with different features. The links to these are on our handout that Crystal sent out. So the first one is an assignment calculator from Simon Fraser University, and it breaks down the steps for you into, excuse me, recommended percentages, identifying the day you should begin each step. So for example, it might recommend 20% of the time for research and tell you the date to start, maybe 10% of the time for outlining and the date to start that step, 20% for drafting, and so on. This version is nice because it allows you to import the first day of each step to your Outlook calendar. And the instructions on how to do that are on our handout. Now be sure to interpret each calendar event it enters as the day to begin that step. You might want to manually change the event to recur each day until the next step begins. But remember to schedule in break days. That's always important as well. The next one is the University of Toronto calculator, and it's useful because it allows you to choose between several different types of assignments, including literature review, as well as annotated bibliography, presentation, and even graduate school application. Similar to the first one, you'll receive recommended steps, but different types of assignments might have slightly different steps. So this assignment calculator not only gives you a recommended timeline, but it also gives a guideline for how to approach the particular type of assignment. And with the U of T calculator, you can also generate a PDF that provides the steps and dates. Personally, I found it more useful to manually input the dates into my Outlook calendar, but either way, these tools can be a starting place for planning when starting an assignment. And they can definitely help you keep on track with the steps of the writing process. You'll also find a link to our writing process webpage on the handout, and that page lists these and many other tools for every step of the writing process. Now, if you're very visual or tactile, you may also want to print a blank monthly calendar and write down which step of your assignment you should be working on each day, according to your own plan or according to the assignment calculator. Excel has a template for this, and the template you see here is called Blank Monthly Calendar, and the instructions for how to find it are on our handout. Alternatively, you can print your calendar from Outlook with a specified date range and 1 month per page, and instructions to do that are also on our handout. Okay, now even if you're doing a much longer project, there's an assignment calculator for that as well, like these ones, specifically for the graduate thesis and dissertation. The University of British Columbia's thesis calculator allows you to choose a master's or PhD option to get tailored results. The steps are broken down by semester. Detailed steps are given not only for writing, but also suggested professional development and self-care. Now this time you can sign up for email reminders, which could be useful if you're more apt to check your email than your calendar. A downside is that it's geared toward UBC students, and some links or suggested steps are relevant only to them. However, you might be able to find similar resources at AU, and if you're not sure, then you can email us at the right site, and we'll do our best to help you track down what you need. Sorry, I just noticed that someone was saying that they aren't able to see the presentation. Looks like others can. So if you're not able to see it, you might want to just leave and come back. Sometimes that can reset Teams, and that can help. And hopefully that will get resolved. Looks like Crystal and Jen are giving you some suggestions in the chat. So thanks for doing that. There's one more calculator that we'll look at, and that's the University of Minnesota's dissertation calculator. This one gives very detailed strategies for each step. The steps include developing research methodology, reviewing the literature, analyzing data, and writing. Like the SFU calculator that we discussed at the beginning, each step is broken down by percentage time to spend, accompanied by a due date for each step. So very useful tools there. Another suggestion is to create a blank calendar in Outlook devoted completely to this one longer project. And this is a good idea to help keep you focused on the various steps of one project at a time. The assignment calculator will suggest the time periods for each step. Then you can put them into Outlook, signed in with your AU email address. And here you can see I created a calendar with different steps from that University of Minnesota dissertation calculator. I color-coded each step so that I could quickly see where one ends and another begins. So for example, it shows in yellow when to begin the literature review starting in April. And our handout contains instructions for how to create and print a yearly calendar that looks like this one. You can print a hard copy or print to PDF for a digital copy. And for more detail of what to do each day, you might still choose to use a calendar devoted to this one particular project, but you can actually overlap it with your regular calendar, which is what you see here. So this makes any entry onto the graduate writing calendar the different color gray, then entries onto the regular calendar, which are green. So you can see them both at once. So gray is one calendar, green is the other, but you can see them at the same time or one at a time. You just close one and look at one at a time. Okay, we've got a quick challenge here to sum up our discussion of time management. It's what is the benefit of using an assignment calculator? And you can answer at menti.com or at the link which I'll put in the chat. And at the longer link, you'll be able to see the results. I hope. This is the first time I've done this, but, well, second time. First time with hopefully what will be results that you can see. I'm about to put those in the chat. And you can also answer at menti.com by entering 6961575. So 6961575 at menti.com. And I'll read out the question. What is the benefit of using an assignment calculator? Is it A, break the writing process into steps, B, give you a schedule to input in your calendar, C, manage your time while writing, or D, all of the above? And after you enter your answer, remember you can click the longer link in the chat to hopefully see the results. And I'm going to go to the results now and see what people are saying. Looks like most people, looks like everyone is noticing that the assignment calculator helps with all three of these things, breaking the process into steps, giving you a schedule to input, and to manage your time while writing. So that's great. And hopefully you'll give this tool a try and find it as useful as I have.
Okay, thanks, Sarah Jean. I think we're ready to move on now to search journaling. If everyone's comfortable with that. Thank you again, Sarah
Sounds
Jean.
good.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so now on to search journals. So as you search it's very helpful to keep a document or a journal of the terms you have used, how you found the results you found, and notable articles or citations that you might want to revisit. So I'm going to go over how you might use either a Word document or an Excel sheet to journal your searches. So here's an example in Word. So Word documents are very quick and easy to format, pretty simple to use. You just start typing and it's pretty easy. So here are the main components of the search journal that I've kept in a Word document. It's a bit hard to tell, but essentially I make sure to have these key pieces of information. So the topic, what am I researching? What is my current research about? The databases I searched, where was I looking? The searches I tried, so what keywords did I use, what combinations, that kind of thing. What results did I get? And did this search come up with any relevant links or relevant articles? And I've included those links there in this search journal. So again, when you are doing a search journal like this in Word, very quickly, we do recommend copying the entire citation of an article you found or a book or whatever you might want to use, because in case you need to find it again, you want to make sure you have all the relevant information you might need for that. So titles, that kind of stuff. So you just want to make sure you include as much as you can and making sure it's relevant. So, and again, if you look a little bit closer in a journaled document, I do try to identify where, when, and what I searched, and maybe what's missing as well. So I can correctly format my citations later on if I choose, but for now, I'm just sort of highlighting this, noting that it needs to be correctly formatted, but including all of this information here that I mentioned before. So what I found and where, essentially, and how it might be relevant. And as you go, you can journal your searches as well. So when you're doing your searches and you're finding results, what you're basically going to be doing at first is sort of reading abstracts and then maybe reading some full articles just to make sure that your searches are relevant. And you want to make notes on individual resources and then perhaps make a short list of the selected resources for your current assignment. Because I know when I'm doing research, I come away with a huge list of resources, and I realize as I go through, okay, some of these articles are more or less relevant, right? Just kind of a way to narrow as well. There are a couple of ways to consider journaling aside from Word. So you can use Excel. This is an example of a search journal created in Excel, and it's a little bit maybe easier in some ways. This is really good for search strategies, and we do have a template of this included in our handout. So here in this example, the researcher has first identified their search topic, which is hand hygiene in hospital workers. And they've gone ahead and separated all of their main concepts of the research topic out here and then generated synonyms for each one as well. So a variety of search words and keywords that they might use, and then keeping it all organized in this spreadsheet in this way. And you also, of course, when you're doing searches, want to combine your searches using and or. So of course, similar words, you're going to search for or. So hand washing or hand hygiene, and then discrete concepts with and. So hand washing and hospital employees, for example. So if you do need more help with your search structure, we do have some resources again on that handout, in particular a guide to Boolean searching. So Boolean is just ands and ors, but anyway, useful to know. Okay, and then when you do your searches as well, of course, you want to document the databases you've searched in as well as the results you have found. And in this document, we created a space for comments. So you can document the relative merits of each search. So did this combination of keywords in this database yield too many items, not enough? This is a really good way to keep track of your searches. Again, it's quite general, but you also might want to create a separate document to make notes on individual articles and other resources. So my Word journal kind of had everything combined. It had my databases, my search terms, my results, individual articles. In this case, I'm using the spreadsheet more to document search strategy and results, and then I could use an Excel sheet or a Word document for other individual items later on. So to get into a bit more detail here, some of our databases do allow for creating search histories and alerts. So most of these do require setting up a personal account with a vendor of a database, for example, EBSCO or ProQuest. So I will just show you a quick example here. So EBSCO is the company that develops a variety of databases we subscribe to, as well as our Discover search tool. So if you are using Discover quite frequently, you can create an EBSCO account within there. And no, that's totally separate from your library account. It's only for EBSCO databases and Discover searches. But if you use those tools a lot, you can create a search history there. So if you do Discover search, for example, you can see search history right underneath those search boxes. So that's a way to keep your searches documented. So again, if you have an account that you've created separate from your library account, it's within EBSCO, and you've logged in and you've done a variety of searches that are more or less successful, you can save that search history in your account. If you do not have an account, though, and you're just going into EBSCO, not logged in with a personal account, your search history will disappear, though, once you've logged out. So just be aware of that. If you step away from the page, if you log out, close the search, those search histories will disappear unless you have already created an EBSCO account, a personal account that you've logged into. So just be aware of that. So some of the databases do offer in-house or in-database tools, but they are totally separate from the library and they're used at your own discretion, essentially. So yes, and some databases do allow you to set up alerts as well for particular searches. So if something new is added to the research area you are interested in, you'll be notified. Extremely useful, especially for graduate students if you're doing a dissertation or a thesis and have to be up to date. If you have a really good search strategy that's getting you really good results, then keep that search alert, and then you'll get notified every time something else comes up in the database that matches that. And I have a question here from Monique. How do you log into a database account? You essentially have to create it first. So if you go into Discover, which is a default search on the homepage, you'll see a place where it says sign in. If you click on the sign in the top right, that will prompt you to create an account. Most of our databases do have that same function. That said, again, totally separate from the library. These are personal accounts. We get you access through our database subscription so you can read materials, but anything peripheral to that, like if you create up a personal account for you to save citations, that's outside the library. So just FYI. But once you go into a databases page, you can find means to create an account there if you feel like it. All right, I also like to use Google Scholar for alerts, because Google Scholar does have, of course, access to a wide variety of publication citations. They do, however, have more limited search options, so you can't always come up with the most granular search term for your research. That said, if you have a search term that you really like, I actually have a really basic few search terms that I use, like open scholarship, for example, or Scully Communications, library publishing, and they will send me articles on those topics because I've created a search alert. So it's very useful. Okay, so we're moving on a bit now. We've talked a bit about documenting things and such. Now we're going to talk about organizing your research more specifically. So I'll continue on with the discussion before we get back to Sarah Jean a bit later. So I'm going to talk about citation management software and then some file folders and file namings. Oh yes, and next week, same time next week, I'm doing a session on citation management focusing on Zotero. So we will talk a bit about this, but next week will be our in-depth session specifically about Zotero. Okay, so briefly what citation management tools are is they are softwares that allow you to save and organize your literature as you're searching. So it can also be used to help you to cite items and to create bibliographies. Really popular for that purpose, although there are some caveats. We're doing a webinar next week, and we have entire recorded webinars available on this topic, but for now we're going to focus on citation management really briefly as it relates to keeping you organized. So any questions about these tools in particular, you can reach out to the library or you can join us on our session next week. And thanks, Sarah Jean, for that link if you want to sign up for that. Okay. So this is an example of an article I have found doing a search for research data management as an example. So this is an example of a search within a collection within our database ScienceDirect. So in the top right corner of my browser, I can, for example, and we'll get into way more detail about this next week, you can click My Zotero, which is a way to, it's an add-on for your browser that allows you to save articles into your Zotero account. And once an item is saved into your Zotero library, you can attach PDF copies, snapshots of the page, and you can use notes, things like this. So where did you find the item? How relevant were my search terms? That kind of thing. Is this a useful article for my research at all, etc. And you can do like manual changes within your Zotero account as well. But this is what your Zotero account looks like once you've already pulled in a citation. So basically, essentially three essential panels, ways to keep your searches organized and your search materials organized more so. This is an example here of how you can organize items you've saved into different folders and subfolders for different assignments and different courses. What's useful about Zotero is you can also use things like tags. So you can tag resources with keywords to make them easier to find. And then once you do a tag search, if you have a really extensive, say, Zotero library, you can use clicking on tags to find items that you've saved into your collection in Zotero. But again, this might be a bit confusing at first, but we will go into this in more detail next week for sure. And for example, I keep a list of tags I use frequently, and then I can just use them to ping to different articles that I've saved if I want to easily find them later on. So items in your Zotero collection, of course, don't, oh yeah, sorry, and then you can also create notes as well. So it's just an example there of the notes option. Again, we will talk about that a bit more next week. But you can create notes and save those in Zotero as well, so it's very handy. And just an example of some more of the tags here. Because I forgot to navigate forward earlier. You can see more examples here. All right. So again, key to useful use of Zotero and citation management tools is folders. So you want to keep things organized into separate folders. Typically, you want a separate folder for each assignment because once you do that, that's an easy way to keep things organized in terms of creating bibliographies, tracking down full text, that kind of thing. It's much easier to organize your papers by course or assignment or topic in this way. But not everyone likes using citation management tools. Again, next week we'll go into much more detail. They are quite convenient, especially as, unlike databases, you don't need individual logins. It's a single place to save everything. But that said, you can create a naming system for folders and files on your computer, and actually tends to be what I personally prefer. But again, it's all up to you, what you prefer. If you are just using files and folders on your system, or your computer rather, you want to be very consistent and document these naming conventions as well. So it can be pretty simple to create files and folders, but you just want to make sure you name them and give them easy names that are easy to remember and track down again later, and that are distinct and unique. So yes. You can also create shortcuts on your desktop as well to those folders. But essentially, it's good to think about what files you already have on your computer and how you already organize them in your head already. So for example, everyone has, a busy life and have different files to organize. Maybe they're personal, maybe they're related to their education or to their work or to their taxes or to medical or whichever way. But I like to organize my files in general, if I'm doing a course, for example, or a program, by semester, and then the course within the semester, and it's kind of descending order. So it really, though, depends on your program and your personal organizing system and what you prefer. So I tend to go like, entire semester and then course by course, and then within those folders, breaking it down even folder, or within my personal work as well. If I'm doing a presentation, I would have an overall program folder and then specific presentation and then specific documents related to that, for example. But again, it is very personal. So naming your folders are important, naming your files and folders, because you do want to have sort of a convention or a consistent system of naming. So you want to make sure they're easy to find. So of course you want to use descriptive names for your folders. Again, is it a course? Is it an assignment? Is it a bunch of readings? What is it? Descriptive. You want to use consistent format for dates, for example, like do you use year, month, date, or the other way around? Of course, you want to avoid using rather unusual characters in your file names because it can make them harder to find. I tend to avoid underscores, I tend to use underscores and avoid spaces, just because spaces within file names can create problems with interoperability, although that might be an old school problem, but I still tend to follow that convention too. And you want to keep your names kind of as short as possible, and you want them to be consistent. So again, consistent within a course or for a specific assignment, etc. So we just have some examples here of ineffective file names because they're not essentially very descriptive. So say I'm in an English paper, I'm in an English class rather, and I'm writing a paper. If I have English 101 paper draft 1, draft 2, etc., that's not really descriptive. Like, what is my paper about? Or, it's good to have a second draft note on there, but it's not very descriptive. Same with like these Johnson notes, PDF. So I have 2 articles by somebody named Johnson. Well, okay, this doc is my notes on that article, but Johnson 1 or Johnson 2, which article is it if they're both by the same author, for example? Or if this article is about nursing theory, well, who wrote it? And there's a bunch of spaces, right? So we just have a couple of examples of slightly more effective naming conventions for files. So for example, in my English 101 paper, it's on Margaret Atwood, for example. Or the Johnson paper that I read and took notes on, one of them was education theory and one of them was practice. And the article on nursing theory was by Smith from 2015. I tend to include the date of publication in a saved article, for example, because that way I know, okay, this is not out of date or it's relatively new or relatively old. So again, different ways to name your files, but you want to just make sure essentially that they are consistent. So you want to make sure that you're using consistent naming conventions that are descriptive and that are useful for you, whatever works for you. Okay, so that's a lot about notes and files. Sarah Jean is now going to take over for a bit too, and she will discuss note-taking.
Thanks, Jen. Those are really great pointers. It's something that I'm still working on, but I can attest it's very important to help you find the right file on your computer. Make sure you've got it named descriptively. So the effective note-taking strategies that I'm going to discuss now include reading actively, using templates to take your notes and engage with the material, and Jen will also weigh in on this one, and knowing how and when to quote, paraphrase, or summarize. So when preparing to take notes effectively, it's important to read actively for understanding. Reading actively means that first you continually think critically about what you're reading, reflect on what you've read, and think about questions that you have about your source. Second, use strategies to determine the source's main findings. So when working with journal articles, for example, like Jen mentioned earlier, start by reading the abstract to determine if the article may be useful. And determine the article's conclusions from the abstract before you read the article to help you understand it as you read it. Third, scan the article, reading the headings to determine relevance and to preview the article's main points. So, if you've got it printed, flip through page by page, look at what those headings are, and that'll start to give you an idea of what the article is about. And at the same time, you can scan for key words that relate to your topic. When reading books, you can use the table of contents, headings, and index to help you find relevant material. And in any text, the introduction and conclusion or discussion can also be useful portions to read and reread to help gain understanding. Fourth, you should periodically take breaks from reading and summarize it in your own words, just to make sure that you've understood it. So whatever you just read, think about it, try and put it in your own words in your head. That's going to help you understand it and ensure that then you can go ahead and write about it. So try not to just read straight through. It's really ideal to think about it and synthesize as you go. Once you're done reading, you might also spend a few minutes explaining the main points to a study buddy, spouse, friend, colleague. And this is helpful even if the listener is unfamiliar with the subject, because it will force you to put the ideas in plain language, which will probably be different than the terminology that's in the journal article. And in turn, summarizing to someone else can ensure your understanding and prepare you for taking notes. And finally, part of active reading is engaging physically with the text. So you can start out by highlighting, underlining, and circling to identify main points and keywords or phrases. Write out your questions, your thoughts, your observations in the margins. If you find your brain doing word association with outside concepts or related words jumping into your head, you can note those in the margins as well. If there's a visual way you can present some of the information to help yourself summarize it, you might want to try that. For example, put a flowchart of related ideas on a page that you can then attach to the article. You could also make a diagram of a particular concept that you want to remember, or even create a doodle that represents some important information. By doing this, you're interacting with the source physically, which helps with comprehension and engagement. And you can engage physically with the text even if you don't print the article by using a PDF reader's highlighting and commenting functions, or by using a citation management system like Zotero. So here I used Zotero to highlight different types of information I was searching for in different colors. You can use whatever color coding works for you, but I used blue for key terms and definitions, yellow for points on my research topic, purple for super important points on my research topic. I definitely use color. I also added a comment questioning the point in yellow so that I would remember to clarify it when taking my notes later. Comments and highlights can be viewed in Zotero on the sidebar to the left of where the article appears. You can see that on the left-hand side of your screen right now. You can also use the select all and copy functions to copy your annotations into a Word document, either all at once or one color at a time by clicking the color in the bottom left-hand corner. And Jen may be talking to you more about that next week. There are some benefits to using a PDF editor instead of or alongside Zotero, or some people have a preference for a different one. Here I used the browser Microsoft Edge. It's another great free option that allows you to highlight in several colors as well as draw and add typed text. I like the drawing part. It's useful for showing relationships between points, which you can see with my arrows and adding further emphasis. I've got that attempt at a blue star in the bottom left-hand corner. And you can add text wherever you want it on the page. The edits you make in a PDF editor will also appear in Zotero as long as they're reading from the same file. And on our handout, you can find links to web pages that explain how to annotate with Zotero, Edge, or Acrobat, how to use your preferred PDF editor alongside Zotero. So if you want to use Zotero to read the article or to manage your citations, but you want to use a different PDF editor, the handout explains how to do that, as well as how to change the default PDF editor in Zotero so that when you open the PDF in Zotero, it will open in that other editor. Now, we do recommend to keep a working bibliography of items you read during your research. A bibliography differs from a references or works cited page because it includes works used during research, but not directly referenced in your writing. So therefore, you can use both a bibliography and a references page. The bibliography is really for your own use, but it should include all items you've consulted, even if they don't seem directly relevant to your argument. You might have read them for background information, an additional perspective, or a wider scope. It's possible that the source could come in handy later, so it's good to keep its bibliographic information in case you want to refer back. Unfortunately, if you use a citation management system like Zotero, it does most of the work for you. Be sure to also include additional details of where you found the source, like the call number of a book and the library you obtained it from, even the name of a friend you borrowed the book from, or the website that housed a certain report in case you need to find it again. This is really important, especially when you're at the thesis and dissertation level. So many sources over numerous months and years, you can forget where you found a source. And I can attest to this as well, because on a paper I wrote, I ended up not being able to find the website or URL to include in my reference entry for a report I had downloaded. I never did find the report online again, even though I had a PDF copy of it. It was like it just had come out of nowhere. And that became a problem for it being a reliable source for me to include. And most importantly, therefore, be sure to record the complete citation of each source you use for your writing. Like Jen mentioned earlier, you don't have to necessarily format it right away, but keep a note that you'll need to format it later. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that references are done at the end of a project just because the references page comes at the end of the document. You should really be recording that information all the way along your research process, and it'll make your life easier later. When I begin a paper, I like to create the title page and the references page. It's just part of my process. And every time I cite a source, I add the complete reference. You can copy it directly from Zotero, which you can see in Figure 1 on the left there. And if you're not using Zotero, you could try a tool like MyBib to help you create your references smoothly in any style. And we've linked to MyBib on our handout as well. However, if you're using a citation generator like either of these, just be sure that when you do your formatting later, that you double check the formatting of the reference. Sometimes the generator can miss details like correct capitalization or the correct font for certain items for your style guide. For example, it may forget the italics for a journal title. So know your style guide and double check your references when you get to that point in the writing process. Now we'll look at some templates you can use to help guide your note-taking as you research, and Jen has provided our first template.
Great. Thank you, Sarah Jean. So yeah, this particular template is geared towards in-depth reading of a single item. So I'm going to explain what I use each section for. And then, and also, you don't have to use all the sections in your own. Again, it's kind of idiosyncratic to yourself. But think about what is most relevant to you. And there's an empty copy of this template, I believe, in the handout as well. So there are tags here. So you want to match the tags in your citation management system. So usually I would assign my own tags, for example, but you can also look at keywords assigned to an article listed in the abstract. So you can come up with your own keywords that are relevant to your topic. But again, if you look at an article, almost always this metadata around it will have a description. It'll have an abstract and it'll have keywords. So you can pull keywords out of that if you want to create tags. But you do basically want to have a quick description of what the article is about, 1 or 2 sentences. And then you want to have a few takeaways. So for example, 1 or 2 points that are key for me and relevant to what I'm working on. And then the quick description sort of describes the article itself. The section also gets more into why I might want to use it for a particular project, why it's relevant particularly for me. And then again, you want to have sort of documenting some key terms that are defined in the article, for example, some of the author's sort of key important points. And this is similar to reading actively as well. You're kind of making these notes as you're going too. So I tend to, for example, summarize as I read and then pull the most important pieces for me and put them into this document here as well. And then I also include things like the methodology of if it's a research article, for example, how was the research designed, experiment, surveys, interviews, etc. And then just other important points of interest, for example. Do I have any critiques, interesting connections with other articles that I've read, other ideas, that kind of thing. So again, and this was actually written by a colleague, so this is for her current project she's working on, but they're all items that relate to AU, for example. So she would summarize this again into other takeaway documents to use as well. And so you would set up your template. So the things that are the most relevant to you are easiest to see. And then also that you can follow up quite easily on references or concepts that you want to look up again. So essentially using a quick template allows you to pull information from an article. This is again specifically for an article, in-depth reading, and plug that information into the template. So you're keeping track and also noticing where it's relevant to your research. And it's sort of active reading as well. And I will send it back to Sarah Jean.
Thanks, Jen. We'll go through a couple more templates and ideas for note-taking here, and then I will answer Lori's question in the chat. So this is another template just to give an idea of how to gather evidence, data, or quotes that you want to discuss in your paper. And I just want to thank the student who suggested that I change the format of the template and use Excel. So that's what I've done here. To begin, you'd place the citation in the first row and then summarize the main idea underneath it. The main points identified in the next row will also usually consist of summarizing kind of the general ideas. Then you can go into more detail in the supporting details row with paraphrases and direct quotes. And we'll talk about how to decide when to do each of those, summarizing, paraphrasing, and so on a little bit later. Supporting details might include evidence like findings, data, sentences of analysis or discussion, and memorable wording or definitions. And you should also include a comments section in case you want to add any thoughts of your own or questions that you have and that you want to follow up on. You might want to further differentiate the types of notes with a key that identifies different fonts used. So for example, you might use italics to identify paraphrases, quotation marks, of course, for quotes, direct quotes, and bold for your own comments. And the use of different colored fonts could be useful as well. And just a quick note in case I didn't mention it, these templates are available via our handout that Crystal sent out. This comparison template, adapted from HEART, is also designed for multiple sources at once, which is particularly useful for literature reviews and in-depth research papers because it allows you to group sources by topic and explore their similarities and differences. This in turn gives you a way to structure your paper or literature review by subtopic or theme. So choose a subtopic or theme and place it in the key concept row. Each column will be used for a different article, just like the last one. That's how that Excel one worked as well. And then identify the author and date listed in the top row. You can change the category names in that first column as suits your own research. This really is just to give you a starting place. Then fill out each column for the source listed at the top. That way you can understand how different sources compare in their findings on this particular subtopic or theme. And here's an example of a mind map or relationship map, also from HEART, to show you that when working with an article to understand its contents, you don't have to treat the information in a linear fashion. Playing with it in a visual fashion can help you engage with it and thus understand it more comprehensively. And Jen will show you some other ideas for mind mapping later. But you can do this through any approach that works for you for a single article, and you might find it even more useful for exploring the ideas you glean from multiple articles at once. Again, kind of exploring those themes and how they relate to each other. And that can really be helpful for guiding your thesis development for your paper. Okay, before I talk about how and when to quote, I will just answer Lori's question in the chat. Why is it important to track where you found the source if you have a copy of it? Does that mean it won't be accepted? Well, most style guides like APA, MLA, Chicago, and so on, they require you to show in your reference where it came from. So a lot of the research we do is online, of course, and so you often have to give a URL. As in the example I was talking about, it was a report from a website, so I would have to give the URL of the website of actually the page where I found that PDF. And if you're working with, say, a journal article, you may have to give a DOI, a digital object identifier. Hope I'm getting that right there, Jen, librarian. And
Yes,
it's like a unique, oh, thanks. It's like a unique address for each journal article. And so your reader can see where to go and they can verify the source, read it themselves. The problem in the case I was discussing where I didn't record the URL is that the report got taken down. I think it got taken down because I couldn't find it again. And this is also why we would include an access date for lots of web resources that may change because then, you know, you have kind of a record of that you did go to it at that time, but maybe it's changed since then. But in my case, the big problem was I didn't have a URL. So I wouldn't be able to give a complete reference. And that just can be a little bit compromising for academic integrity. Of course, I would be able to share the report with my instructors, so that might be kind of your backup. But yeah, important to keep a record. Just, maybe it was still out there and I just couldn't find it. So I hope that answers your question, Lori. And Victor said that he couldn't find the slides in his email. So it's possible if you signed up a bit later, you may not have received them, but you can reach out to us. I'll put my email address in the chat. If you have other questions or you're looking for the slides, please just check your junk first, so that I don't get 50 emails that you don't have the slides, but you can also reach out and I'll send you those. So now we'll move on to knowing how and when to quote or paraphrase or summarize. You'll do potentially all of these in your note taking, but then also as you're turning your notes into a draft. So it's important to know when to quote versus when to paraphrase, and that's what we'll start with. In most cases in a research paper, your writing should be made up of mostly paraphrases because it's your writing. It should be mostly your words. But there are certain times when quoting using someone else's exact words can be useful. So you can use quotes where wording is very memorable or important. The author's words should be unique and unusual and get their point across concisely. Quoting might be useful when defining a term because the wording cannot easily be changed without altering the meaning. It's also pertinent to quote when you want to respond to or critique someone else's exact words. And that's common when doing a close reading of a novel or engaging in a critical debate in your field. So you may quote more or paraphrase more depending on what field you're in as well. But just in general, in a research paper, most of the time you'd be relying mainly on paraphrasing. So overall, in that case, try to minimize use of quotes in a research paper. And when you do quote, choose the part of the quote that's most relevant. It could even just be a short phrase. A short quote can be embedded within a sentence in which your voice is prominent, paraphrasing the rest of the idea, or analyzing the short phrase. And note that a quote or any piece of evidence never speaks for itself. It's up to you to explain the quote in the context of your own paper. So as a writer, you've chosen that quote for a reason, and while note-taking, be sure to record the reason that it's important to your paper so that you remember how you want to use the quote when you start outlining or drafting. I've fallen victim to forgetting that myself. And when you do quote, ensure that you record the page number as well, and always put your quotes in double quotation marks to signal that they're the exact words of the source's author. That way you won't forget when you go on to drafting later. Now, it's also important to take the time to paraphrase and summarize effectively when taking notes. That will help to capture a clear and complete understanding so that you remember when you return to your notes later. The main difference between a paraphrase and summary is that a paraphrase is of a specific wording or passage, maybe a sentence or two, up to a short paragraph, while a summary is to identify and record the main idea or thesis, or the main points that support the thesis of a source. Like quoting, you'll actually only paraphrase when you want to record the meaning of a specific portion or passage of the source, a specific statement, whereas a summary is more general. What's the idea? When you're working with several sources, much of the work you do to collect your notes will be summarizing. It's essential to record the main idea or argument of each source you read so that you document the context of your other notes. Main points, which are pieces of support for the argument, are also important to allow you to follow the logic of the author's argument or findings later. You can also summarize specific passages by stating the idea of the passage in just a few words. Paraphrases come in with specific details like pieces of evidence, findings, data, the author's analysis, or discussion. Just like with a quote, always record the page number of a paraphrase so that you can find the original later. And the same can be said for summary if summarizing a particular portion of the text. Now we're getting pretty close to the end, so I think I'm going to skip the paraphrasing steps and refer you to our effective paraphrasing webinar. I will put the link for that in the chat. I'll just mention that if you're struggling with paraphrasing and after watching our webinar you're still not fully confident, then you can email the right site to book an appointment for strategies and support. And I think we'll just also skip our challenge because we only have 5 minutes left and we might have a couple questions after Jen's next section.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sarah Jean. We'll talk a bit about research planning finally at the end here. So to formulate a research plan, I got to skip ahead here. To formulate a research plan, the first thing you want to do, of course, is pose your topic as a question. So as you read, you want to think about your stance on your topic or the angle at which you'd like to examine it. So, and of course, you're going to want to narrow these ideas down to a focused thesis topic as you continue to gather evidence from your research. So, of course, research is iterative. You might have an idea at first. As you read more evidence, your idea will change. Maybe your thesis will change too. So as you proceed to develop a thesis, think about the resources you're going to need. Are they books, journal articles, theses, dissertations, etc. And then find out where you will find these resources, plan these out. And then, of course, you can plan a research journal. And we have an example of this adapted from the University of New Hampshire on the handout there. And so, of course, doing some pre-reading before you even start digging or doing research in depth can really help you get a handle on what you're going to be looking for. So as you do pre-reading, generating ideas, usually looking online, it can be very helpful to create a mind map. So, for example, you might have an idea of, so this is an example from my colleague who does reference. A lot of students come to her with the assignment that's something like women in ancient Greece. And that's a huge topic. You got to parse that out into something a little bit more searchable and a little more of an argument. So you might want to focus on feminism, specific geographic areas in Greece, maybe religion, motherhood, that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure you're narrowing it down quite focused based on your reading. So this is an example here of a mind map. So we've started with the main idea, which is a circle in the middle. You can't really see what it says, but they're all just like circle and then ideas branching out. This is an example. And then as you go, you want to refine your mind map to the areas that you really want to focus on as you search. So you want to go from a lot of ideas, a lot of terms, to something a little bit more narrow. And just as a specific example here, I want to show you, this idea is what impact does screen time have on cognitive function? That's a huge topic, right? So each branch of the mind map represents a specific aspect of the idea. So the topics could include older people or younger people, cognitive processes, screen time, all that kind of stuff. And based upon my brainstorming, I've taken a smaller branch of that entire mind map and decided I want to focus on this area for my research. So in this example, I've decided to focus on how, say, video games affect the memory and reading comprehension of children. So it's much more narrow. So this hopefully will give you an idea of how you can take your big, huge ideas and make them a little bit more manageable, searchable, and then documentable. Okay, and then so finally, we've come to the end of our presentation. We covered a lot of material, so if you have time, any questions, we have about 2 minutes. We have a couple little wrap-up points here. So in conclusion, of course, organization styles are extremely personal. So you want to be personal, you want to be consistent with those. Decide what works for you. You know, we can't tell you what to do. You have to decide for yourself. We can give you some tools, some approaches. You can decide what ones you want to follow, what strategies you want to try. But just do make sure you are consistent and your approach, and that you back everything up, and that you write throughout the entire research process. We want to give you some more information on where to go for help. Of course, the library does offer webinars, tutorials, search strategies, all kinds of LibGuides, research guides for assistance. Any question you have with the research process, we can help out, as can the right site, of course. We also offer research data management assistance. This is my colleague, Robin Stobbs, who does research data management. So if you have a very specific, highly data-based approach to your research and you need some help with that, Robin is who you'd go to for that. Essentially, yeah, the right site too. Maybe I can hand it off to Sarah Jean for the conclusion if you want to give some more information about the right site. in brief?
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, and I put the link to all of our services in the chat to book an
Perfect.
appointment. For example, if you would like some more strategies for paraphrasing, um, the webinar schedule link is there, as well as a link to our survey about this presentation. So thank you so much for coming out, and hope you learned something that you can apply in your research and writing.
Thank you,
Yes.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.